around 15 of the women and children decided that they had no choice but to try.
Rawhiya was leading them. She said if all the women and children start moving out, then everyone else could follow afterwards. So she distributed white flags and led them out. She walked at the front carrying a white flag, followed by other women carrying their children.
When we reached the top of the road, the special forces that were positioned in a house right opposite to us, they took us by surprise.
But despite the presence of children and the display of white flags, the military opened fire.
I was right next to her, a centimetre away. Our neighbour was also walking next to her. She was holding up her child as though a flag. Then he shot her. He shot her and she immediately fell to the ground.
A bullet hit Rawhiya in the head. It entered through one side and went out through the other. I took a bullet in the foot.
At the far end of the street, Muhammad, still tied and blindfolded, heard the shots a few meters from where he was held.
I was really scared. I was worried that something was going to happen to my family. I heard the shots being fired at Rawhiya and I heard her scream, "God is great." But that scared me more because it meant that they were killing people, and I thought that they were going to kill me when they started pulling out.
Yasmin, who had been walking with Rawhiya, rushed to her aid.
I was so close to her, but there were special forces in front of me. They started shooting at me again, and the bullets were passing over my head. But they didn't get me this time. Only a small splinter of metal that stuck in my arm.
I immediately knew that she died. I told the women she's gone. My mother died. They were trying to comfort me by saying she's going to be fine, but I shouted at them, "She's gone. She's dead. I know she's dead."
In the nearby town of Khan Yunis, Marwan Abu Raida, a paramedic at the Nasser hospital, was finishing his first call out of the day when he received the call sending him to Khuza'.
I drove straight there. I was still 60 to 70 meters away from the body when what I think were Israeli special forces started shooting at me. I felt powerless. There was nothing I could do for her. My understanding was that the medical teams were protected under international law and ethics. Medical teams should be protected, and they should have freedom of movement and work because they are human service teams.
With the emergency services unable to help them and bulldozers closing in, the women made frantic appeals for help, some of which aired live on the midday news.
A couple of radio stations called us, and we tried to echo our voice and call upon the world to find a solution for us, or to at least save Rawhiya. We didn't know at this point if she was still alive or dead.
We were screaming and holding out white flags so they would see us and not demolish the house with us inside. But they didn't care. It made no difference to them. They started collapsing the walls with us inside.
No one answered our calls for help. At the end, we decided to go out together and face the bombardment. The way we saw it was that it was better to walk into the fire than stay here and die under the rubble. If we went out, some of us might get hit and some of us might die. But at least someone would make it out alive to tell our story to the outside world.
We went through that alleyway, but just as I was about to pass across an exit in the road, followed by the rest of the neighborhood, they started shooting at us again. So everyone went in one of the houses on the street and they were stuck there. But I kept running for about 300 meters until I reached an ambulance and paramedics were waiting for us.
6 hours later, the Israeli army began to withdraw, leaving Muhammad tied up in the house and Rawhiya's body in the street.
They were starting to pull out of the air, and so they told us, when you hear a few gunshots being fired, you can leave. They didn't want anyone to see them. They didn't want to bring attention to themselves.
I ran out to the ambulance and headed towards the body of the martyr, who was dead by then. She bled to death. After she was lying there for about 12 hours, I took the body, which was in horrible condition, and headed to Nasr Hospital in Khan Yunis. You could tell she was killed intentionally, because she received only one shot straight to the head, so it was obvious that the sniper meant to kill her. I wish the International Court of Justice will take action against those who committed these crimes, because what we witnessed here is unbelievable terror.
Across Gaza, the withdrawal of Israeli troops has allowed life to return to normal, or what passes for normal in this giant outdoor prison. Khuza'a has in some respects been fortunate. Some of the houses are still standing. Others have been reduced to piles of rubble that people sift through in the hope of recovering a few possessions. Most of the animals were killed in the Israeli assault, the villagers say deliberately, and the few remaining sheep are now penned away from the watchtowers for fear they too will be shot. No one can work the fields, and any movement beyond the ruined houses instantly attracts the attention of Israeli patrols. Where farmlands once stretched, nothing remains. Only the tracks of the tanks and bulldozers crisscrossing what was once a citrus grove.
Okay. So you came here?
Yes.
But Khuza'a has not been forgotten.
Who was here?
That house.
And they were shooting also?
Fred Abrams is an analyst for the US-based non-governmental organization Human Rights Watch, which investigates human rights violations across the globe.
But you saw only one.
He has been researching white flag killings in Gaza during the course of this conflict.
Our job is to look at how the parties to the conflict, Israel and Hamas, respected or disrespected international law. And there's such a long list of issues, but this case seems to be quite clear-cut, and that's why we focused on it. All the evidence so far suggests that she was shot in plain sight. It was daylight. They saw the flag, and if proven, that would be a war crime.
It's not easy for investigators to build a picture of exactly what happened. The recollections of people under artillery and sniper fire are often contradictory, but in the case of Rawhiya's killing, there is a remarkable consistency.
There are a couple of issues that are interesting about this case. First is the bulldozers and tanks had reached the edge of the village and were ordering people to go into the center. And we know that. I've now interviewed 7 people independently and separately who all testified to that. So they were ordered to leave. But when they came here, they came under fire. So, maybe that's just bad coordination within the military's part. But I believe all the evidence suggests the IDF had firm control of this area at the time of the incident. They were not coming under fire. And so a group of 15 women walked forward waving white flags. And this is a clear open space. I believe that the IDF soldier was based in this house it's a straight shot about 200 meters away. He could have seen them. I don't believe they were running. They were walking forward. Everybody testified. There were probably 10 seconds at least when he saw them. And in our view, then they're obliged to take every effort to, not to target civilians and to distinguish between fighters and civilians. In this case, I don't see why they would have thought that these women would be a risk or a threat to them.
Nasser has obtained a death certificate from the examining doctor, confirming the paramedics' earlier diagnosis that Rawhiya's death was caused by a single shot to the head.
From PCHR.
A GPS calculation of the distance suggests that she was shot at 120 meters. This, together with Fred's findings in other parts of Gaza, have led him to a conclusion which, if correct, would point to a war crime implicating not only the soldier responsible, but the entire Israeli military chain of command.
The IDF, like all militaries, do not publicize their specific rules of engagement. But in research in Gaza that I've done now for the past 2 years, we found often they create certain kill zones. In other words, when they are based in a house, there are sometimes orders, it seems to us, based on the evidence, that anyone who gets within a certain range, say 100 meters, it can be fired upon. That is my hypothesis at this moment.
Despite the significance of Fred Abrams' initial conclusions, there is little Human Rights Watch can do beyond publishing their report.